This is the Thought Leaders Podcast.
So for the, because there's two such different kinds, right? It's a different approach for each one. So for the Thursday videos, which are the recipe videos, it's essentially it's just sitting around trying to think of recipe ideas, and I try to as I'm thinking about that stuff, I try to kind of keep my recipe idea pipeline such that if someone goes to the channel and looks at the recent videos, they would see a nice assortment of things, right?
Yeah.
Even to the point of like color. Like I don't want all of the thumbnails to be the same kind of color food. Like I think that just doesn't grab you, right? So I kind of think about making things of a different color every week to get that just visual variety when people go to the channel. I also try to like have a mixture of meaty and not meaty recipes. It's a shame that, it's a fact that unless it's a bread-based recipe like pizza, anything meatless gets less views. Okay. And which is unfortunate because, I eat meat, but I not nearly as much as my channel would indicate, right? Like I try to eat meatless for most meals, which I think is just a healthier way to eat for our bodies and for our planet, right? But like, I've got sponsors and I need to get the views that I promised them. And so I need to make compromises. Right. But I still try to strike a balance. And if ever I have, a week coming up that doesn't have a sponsor in it, that's when I'll usually put a meatless recipe there. So I'm thinking about that kind of stuff, thinking about having some desserts mixed in to the bunch. Anyways, so I'll come up with a recipe. I will test it, which is, usually a pretty lengthy process. It'll be like a whole weekend of making the same thing over and over and over and over again until it's right. And then the shooting process for that, I've refined quite a bit. I've tried so many different approaches, and a lot of them have not worked. I've done multi-camera shoots. I've done the old school Food Network thing where you shoot the same recipe twice. You do it from a wide angle and then you go in and do it from a tight angle again, and you mix those two takes together. I've tried that. Lots of different things. And what I've found, it tends to work best for me in my workflow is to do what they call shooting for the edit. That is to say, shooting to kind of give yourself, frankly, the minimum options when you sit down to edit, because I need to be able to blast through things really, really quickly. I can't be agonizing over, do I want this shot or this shot? Yeah. And so when you shoot for the edit, basically you say, I'm going to get everything once. And that also forces you to take every single shot very seriously and make sure that every single shot works. So I'm usually these days do single camera. I do the recipe once, one and done, blast through it. I just move the camera around a lot. As I'm cooking, and it's very stressful to go through it. It's so much to juggle, but it's over quickly, and so I'll blast through that. I'll then sit down and scrub through the footage, and look at what I've got, and from that I will write my voiceover script, and I'll then go in my coat closet with this microphone and record my voiceover, and edit that together, get those tracks tight, and then throw that into Premiere and then start editing the footage to the voiceover. And, it's a pretty standard kind of about, an hour of editing per minute of finished video sort of ratio. So I'll edit through that. And then, one of the worst things about being a YouTuber is, once you finish the video, you're not done. Then you got to like think about thumbnail, and you got to think about, hey, buddy. Yes. Hello. Nice to see you.
Hello.
Can you go see your mom? All right. Go see your mom, buddy.
Come on, Leo. Let's go.
Sorry.
Don't worry about it.
Okay. So you got to do thumbnail. You got to do captions. I mean, I try to, if only for the sake of accessibility, I always do real handwritten captions, but also I think that, you gotta you got to be, you want to make all of those muted auto plays worth something. So I always do handwritten captions for all the vids. And, you got to do meta tags and blah, blah, blah. Although my sense is that the algorithm isn't looking at tags so often anymore. It seems to be pulling more from the headline and description, but it's dark magic to try to guess what the algorithm does. I'm probably full of shit. I don't know. But I still try to take it seriously. And I use a Chrome extension called TubeBuddy that's very popular that will suggest tags for you. And that really streamlines that process. It's the only feature of that extension that is worth a damn. But it's worth it. It's worth the money for sure. And so that's how that goes. And then if I have a sponsorship, it's got to go to the sponsor at least 2 business days in advance for approval, which I found to be really good. And it's one of those ways that viewers who are annoyed by in-video sponsorships, I just want to hit them upside the head, because there's so many ways in which that benefits them, right? One of them is simply that it helps me make enough money to making videos for you worthwhile, right? That's one thing. The other thing, though, is having sponsors in most videos, because Colin does such great work, makes my release schedule invaluable, right? In a way that it wouldn't if I was just throwing stuff up there and letting YouTube monetize it. I would be much more lackadaisical in my schedule, right? I might just be like, I'm busy. I'm just going to skip it. I'll do it tomorrow, or maybe I'll just skip the video this week, right? But because I have contracts I signed 3 months ago, for vids coming up, right? I have to do it. And that results in content coming more regularly and reliably to you, the viewer, right? So that's that process. For the Monday videos, the process is pretty different. It starts with a question usually, does marinating actually do anything, or something like that. And I will then usually go to the scientific literature and look to see what's been written. One of the things that I would love to kind of spread understanding of is that so many of the things that professional chefs argue about, how long should you brine something, all kinds of just sort of, empirical, scientific, chemistry type questions about cooking that they fight about have been answered definitively through science, right? They just don't know it because most food science is oriented toward the processed food industry, right? The people who have the money and pay for the research, right? It's not oriented toward restaurant industry, and certainly not toward the home cooking, scene, right? But there's so much you can learn from what the processed food industry and meatpacking industry and all those guys do, right? And in fact, that's kind of what is behind the entire molecular gastronomy movement. It was people like the guys at El Bulli noticing that there was this massive volume of scientific research for processed foods that had ideas that they could apply to actual haute cuisine, right? I would love to kind of spread more knowledge about that, because all you got to do is go on PubMed or ScienceDirect or any of these kind of public searchable places and just search some basic keywords. And there's something, from the meatpacking industry or whatever that answers definitively the question that you have. It doesn't have to be all old wives' tales, There's actual science, right? So I will seek out the science. I will seek out scientists and interview them. And then I'll sit down to write those, and the writing is of those that's a whole day's work usually to write one of those, because it's so much research and everything. I then have to go and do some talking head for that, which was really uncomfortable for me. I'm a radio guy. I don't like thinking about my appearance, and I'm not super comfortable on camera. But it was a mere practical reality that I don't have enough B-roll to cover all that script, I'm just not going to have enough. I'm never going to have enough B-roll to cover all that script. I had to be on camera, right? So what I do now is I set up my camera, I set up my shot. I thought about using a teleprompter setup, and kind of ultimately dismissed that as a possibility for a few reasons. One, even rather compact home teleprompter setups are pretty bulky, and I shoot in my real kitchen, in my real house, not in a studio. And so I have to set up and tear down everything, every single shoot, right?
Oh.
So I'm not going to set up and tear down a prompter every single shoot. The other thing is that it's like, if you see YouTubers who are talking from prompter, you can really tell, if anything, just in their performance, right? There's something robotic about it that is not appealing in the world of YouTube, where authenticity is the primary currency, right? It's not like, it's not like television where it's really, that's not true, right? You can't get away with, it can't feel like Dateline or whatever on YouTube, kids are too smart for that. They see right through it, and also on a practical level, I wear glasses, and you get reflections from prompters on glasses,
Okay.
So the workflow that I eventually kind of landed on was, I put my script on my phone.
Mm-hmm.
I look at my script, and I look at, 3 lines of it, and I try to, rather than memorizing those lines, I try to kind of internalize the idea, of what those 3 lines are saying. And then I look at the camera and try to deliver that idea to camera. And the wording often comes out different from what was on the phone, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I tend to find that usually gets me the best performance. And then I repeat, and I just have to go in kind of, 2-3 sentence blocks. And, because I'm not very good at it, it takes me about 2 hours to kind of get through my whole script. And then and then another 2 hours of sitting down and editing all of that together. And then I got to go back and edit together all the B-roll and everything. And so those are very labor intensive. I mean, usually it's at least 15-16 hours of editing on one of those vids. Yeah, that's the process for those. And one thing I do with those, especially anytime I do anything remotely kind of science-y, I always get the videos fact-checked. At minimum, I get them fact-checked by the experts that I interviewed in the video.
I hope you enjoyed this part of the interview, and for the full interview, remember to click the link below.